and welcome to People in Power. I'm Barbara Serra. On today's show, when the enforcers are on the wrong side of the law.
And he told Bencomo about the murder. Bencomo told Lalo, please don't tell me about any more murders if you know about them. It creates trouble for us. So just please keep quiet. And also, we would prefer if you don't record any more murders.
He's known only as Lalo, a Mexican criminal recruited to work undercover for the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. His job? To infiltrate one of Mexico's most notorious drug cartels based in Cuidad Juarez, a border town notorious for its drug trade. But while acting as an agent for American authorities, he actively participated in 13 murders with the knowledge of his handlers in ICE. When the story surfaced, all efforts were made by ICE to keep the story unreported. It was left to a lone journalist and a retired agent of the Drug Enforcement Administration with an outstanding 30-year career to expose this blatant injustice. Filmmaker Fernando Lucena has the story.
As we all know, and has been said, on Monday, the Bush administration asked Congress to approve $1.4 billion over the next 3 years to help the Mexican government fight drug traffickers. The U.S. Interagency Counter-Narcotics Community estimates that 90% of the cocaine that went from South America to the U.S. transited through Mexico. And drug-related violence has left more than 4,000 Mexicans dead in the last 2 years. No one can deny the severity of this problem. Something obviously needs to be done, and as a country that consumes most of the drugs coming from Mexico, unfortunately, the U.S. has a moral responsibility to play a constructive role.
Is the U.S. government really concerned about the deaths of Mexican citizens as a consequence of the so-called war on drugs? Texas-based journalist Bill Conroy pursued a story that the mainstream media was reluctant to cover. A story that showed the blatant disregard for Mexican lives exercised by the U.S. government counter-narcotic agencies.
The informant worked as a federal highway cop in Mexico before he got into the drug business. And in fact, he said it was kind of a natural transition because of the relationship that the cops had with the drug trafficking organizations.
With his intimate knowledge of the drug trafficking business, Lalo then became an informant for the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. Despite working as an informant, Lalo was caught in the United States while transporting 45 kilos of marijuana. With the purpose of using him for an undercover sting, ICE agents in El Paso persuaded Assistant U.S. Attorney Juanita Fielden to drop the charges against Lalo. It looks like a sleepy border town, but Ciudad Juarez is actually one of the most violent and dangerous cities in Mexico. This city became notorious for being the site of hundreds of unresolved murders and mutilations throughout the past decade. Behind the scenes, Ciudad Juarez is controlled by the ruthless and powerful Juarez drug cartel. Lalo's undercover work for ICE consisted in infiltrating the Juarez drug cartel. His mission was to gather evidence against Heriberto Santillan, one of the top lieutenants in this criminal organization. Whilst Lalo was being monitored as an undercover informant, another unexpected incident took place, which he later described in detail in a statement to the Mexican consulate in Dallas.
In August of 2003, the informant was asked to go to this particular house to open it up and help arrange what was quote-unquote a business meeting with a lawyer called Fernando Reyes. And so Fernando showed up at the house, and Lau, was to let him in. And essentially what happened is it was a trap. There were two Mexican cops inside. Lau had already, previously bought lime and duct tape, and they brought this guy in. He thought he was in here to negotiate a drug deal to help make some money for himself. And he was jumped by these two Mexican cops. And they basically held him down, put a plastic bag over his head, and stick the duct tape around him, trying to suffocate him. But it wasn't quite working, so they ripped out a cord from a lamp and choked him. But then the cord snapped as they were choking him. He's still not quite dead. And finally, they bashed him in the back of the head with a shovel. But during all this, as this guy's struggling, the informant, Lau, is helping to restrain his legs, carrying him, getting him to the floor and so forth. So he's actually assisting in the murder.
That same day, Lalo crossed to El Paso and told his ICE employers what had happened.
After the first murder occurred in Juarez, Lalo came back across the border and he contacted his control officer, who was Raul Bencomo, the officer that was running Lalo as an informant for ICE. And he told Bencomo about the murder. Bencomo told Lalo, please don't tell me about any more murders if you know about them. It creates trouble for us. So just please keep quiet, and also we would prefer if you don't record any more murders.
Lalo always had recording devices, always. Usually, according to him, he would have at least 2, sometimes 3 and 4 different recording devices. After that murder, Lalo's testimony has given statements to me indicating that ICE told him, don't record any more murders.
Sandalio Gonzalez is a retired DEA agent. He was in charge of the El Paso office during the time this murder took place.
After it was learned that the homicide had taken place in August of 2003, and that knowing that there was a prosecutable case against Santillan for drug smuggling, DEA agents made recommendations to ICE and the U.S. Attorney's Office in El Paso to take down the case and arrest Santillan for the drug case and the homicide. These recommendations were ignored.
The ICE office in El Paso reported this issue to headquarters in Washington. The information also went past Juanita Fielden, who immediately informed the office of John Sutton, the U.S. Attorney for Western Texas.
Besides being the most powerful law enforcement official in Texas, Johnny Sutton's also a close personal friend of the President of the United States, George Bush. They're both Texans. Sutton worked for Bush when he was governor of Texas, and when Bush got elected president, he brought Sutton up the ranks and gave him increasingly more powerful positions within his administration, ending with him becoming the U.S. Attorney in South Texas. So essentially, you know, they're good old boys, you know. They're buddies and they take care of each other.
Well, Johnny Sutton, he's a dear friend of mine from Texas. He's a fair guy. He is an even-handed guy.
No action was taken in relation to the murder, and Johnny Sutton's office allowed ICE to, once again, continue using and paying Lalo for his work as an informant.
Well, so you still got the same truck?
Mary is a local from El Paso. She also knows her way around Ciudad Juarez. Mary offered to take Bill and I across the border to see if we could find the house where this story took place.
The informant's job was to open the house up. He would be called by Santillan anytime. Lao would come and open up the house, and they would murder and torture somebody and bury him in the backyard.
It was in this neighborhood that people basically saw the darkest side of the drug war. In this block of houses, this is it.
Doesn't one.
This is it. Shit. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm at this particular house between August 2003 and January of 2004. There were a dozen people buried in the backyard. Most of them first brought inside under pretense or by force, tortured.
Most of them were brought here because they had some way crossed the Juarez cartels. ICE had already set a sting up on the head guy, Santillan, months before these murders occurred. And they could have taken him down then. They didn't, you know. They let this case go on for various reasons, primarily motivated out of, in my opinion, just making a bigger case, getting a bigger headline, getting a bigger career boost. And in the process of that happening, a dozen people were, you know, viciously murdered and tortured. They were needless murders in many ways. Some would argue they would have happened anyway, but, you know, I don't know what your moral barometer is. If you can prevent a murder, that's one life, you know. They're not all equivalent. Every life's unique. I don't know. It's where it happened. Doesn't look like anyone's living here now. It's probably a lot of ghosts. It's probably haunted.
Already unsettled by the scene of so many murders, we also began to fear for our safety. We had drawn too much attention from onlookers, so we decided it was time to leave.
Well, right now, I'll be honest with you, yeah, I don't want to stick around here too long. It's probably safe, but, you know, it's just a gut feeling. It's probably better to move on.
Okay. Well, people noticed us. I saw a couple walking by, and then there's a man outside, and maybe they pay somebody to watch the place and say, well, some people were here filming.
Yeah, the last guy that went here to take pictures was shooting shots, and a Mexican cop showed up and held a gun to his head. He had to talk his way out of it. I'll be honest with you, I'm not afraid of the cartel or the drug guys. I'm afraid of the... Yeah, see, he's mad. It's that American, too. I'm more afraid of the cops. So that's the truth of it. Although they might be one and the same in most cases.
Due to the surge in drug-related violence that has taken place in Mexico in the past few years, the current government has decided to deploy the military to fulfill the job that the highly corrupt Mexican police have failed to do.